profound and mysterious neurological disorder. It manifests in unusual patterns of behavior and interaction and communication. In short, it's a tragic epidemic for which we must quickly find a cure, right? Well, not everybody thinks so. Certainly not Estee Clar Wolfund. Her 4-year-old son, Adam, was diagnosed at 18 months with autism. So, how is she dealing? Well, here's a clue. She founded something called the Autism Acceptance Project, and she's here now to tell us all about it. Welcome, Estee.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about your experience with autism with your son.
Well, as you said, he was diagnosed at 18 months, and we did what everybody does. We suspected something. We got a lot of calls about so many people that we didn't know who had children with autism. We were told what to do, get the diagnosis, official diagnosis, get on the government wait list for funding for ABA therapy, and so forth. And we did all of that, but I found that it just wasn't really working. He was a little boy who wasn't yet capable of sitting at a table for 40 hours a week with the door shut, which is what some ABA therapists or low-quality ABA therapists would do, unfortunately. But we did a variety of things, and I really had to study the variety of things and what was suitable for Adam's learning style, and sort of take a look at autism not as something outside of him, external of him, but part of his world and how he learned. So we started playing, and we really had a rotating door of people coming in and out. We had to believe in ourselves, and we had to believe in our son. So I did all the conferences, what a lot of parents do, and I said, this just doesn't feel right for Adam, and I started to ask autistic adults. I started to seek them out, and I traveled through the US and Canada to meet them, and I read all of their work. And that's what also led me to their artwork, because in my former life I was a curator of art. And when I found Jonathan Lerman's work, for instance, and met Jonathan, I said, some of these popular ideas that autistics will bang their head against the wall forever, and they have no conception of the world around them, and they have no idea of another person's emotion, was absolutely wrong.
Jonathan Lerman is an artist who has autism?
And he is now 18 years old, and he lives in New York.
So is the idea then that you found that I'm trying to see what you mean exactly, that people, when they generalized about autism, they weren't talking specifically to your case, or you thought that there was more to this situation than the conventional therapies were able to fully appreciate?
Well, I think that what you hear as a parent when your child first gets diagnosed is all of the scary things. The media tends to portray autism as an epidemic, which there's no science to prove that it is. We do know, if we study the history of autism, that many people were misdiagnosed. They were diagnosed with emotional disorders, they were institutionalized, they were diagnosed with mental retardation. And we didn't start to pay attention to autism until 1980, and it was changed in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual in 1993, and since then we've seen a rise in autism diagnosis. So thankfully, in a good way, we know more what we're dealing with and how we can approach it. But when you're a parent and you first hear the epidemic scenarios, when you hear the media portray that your child is doomed to a life sentence of hitting their head against the wall, rocking themselves in a corner back and forth, it's not to say that it doesn't happen at certain points throughout an autistic person's life, but it has other reasons. There are reasons that could be associated with that. But it isn't a life sentence, and people with autism continue to learn throughout their lifetime. They're all so incredibly different, and it isn't a life sentence. And
you've sort of captured some of that in this exhibit called The Joy of Autism, which in and of itself is kind of a bold, radical thought in the title. Can you tell us a little bit about that show and the art involved?
I started a blog actually about 1.5 years ago, and I did a show last year, and the title of my blog was The Joy of Autism. And the reason why I insisted on joy is because my son gave me a great amount of joy, and that was the paradox. Here where people were trying to tell me it's a misery, it's a life sentence, it is a challenge, for sure, and it's more of a challenge dealing with those ideas and perhaps stereotypes against the child that you do have. And he was giving me, and continues to give me, so much joy, and I couldn't separate the two, and therefore I called it The Joy of Autism. And I decided to do it to make people think about what autism was, being a part of somebody as opposed to this external illness which is not proven.
Can you talk about the work of the artists, a couple of the artists that we have to show here today?
Yeah, it's really a misnomer. This is Larry Bissonnette, and he is from Burlington, Vermont, and he's 58 years old now. He was actually institutionalized, and he hated it. He used to escape in the middle of the night unlock the padlock just to work in the art studio, which gives you a very clear idea about how people want to control behavior in autistic people and what they versus what they need to do and want to do with their lives. Larry can't really talk. He uses a communication device that speaks for him, and he types very slowly. He would have been considered severely autistic, but I'm dealing with an intelligence here that's huge. And let me give you an example. If you look and focus on the yellow piece, what's very profound about Larry's work is he talks in fractured idiom. And he says, if these possibilities are endless, whenever Larry lets train of creativity swing away from lands of stifling art venues like large malls and banks.
That's a quote from him.
That's
something he typed
That's
up.
something that's the title of that work. So he attributes these, this is how he talks.
Wow.
And it's such a loaded sentence about her. And the blue one is titled, Cages of Captained Kangaroos, Animals Let Freed Lines and Colors Save Tigers of Creativity.
Wow. And there's one more artist here. Can you talk about
That's
the art
Jonathan Lerman. Yeah.
Okay.
He's now 18. When he was 10, he wasn't speaking yet. So again, parents, hold on. Just because a child doesn't speak when they're young, or you don't know when speech is going to come. It may not. That's why you got to get augmentative devices as quickly as possible. But he's now speaking at 18 a lot more. It keeps increasing now that he's becoming a teenager. It's very interesting. But when he did this piece with the tears, he was 10. So he was going to an art studio, and he wasn't doing much. And all of a sudden, he picked up a charcoal and a piece of paper, and he just started to draw like that.
Wow.
Just like that.
So I can see your idea of, trusting that there's more going on here than the banging heads against the walls. That sounds like what you're trying to say, is give people with, don't write off people with autism. There's a lot going inside, and we have to find ways to let it out. What about, I don't know a lot about autism, but my understanding is that there's quite a spectrum or quite a range of cases, of severity of cases. So what, do you think there are people, I can imagine there would be people whose children do bang their heads against the wall sort of all day long, or who have incredibly sort of dire situations that may be more severe than your son's. What do you say to them? Did they sort of rail against you for saying, how dare you say that I need to embrace the autism that's the new, bane of my existence?
Of course, but I think that I'd like to tell those parents I've also dedicated my time to meeting those people who did that as children or young adults, and who have become adults, and really trying to seek out why those behaviors happen. And usually it's because of frustration. It could be some medical reasons as well. And if you're an individual who has difficulty communicating in the first place, and you're told what to do day in and day out, like Larry Bissonnette would say, to consider me like that is really frustrating me. I may bang my head against the wall.
So what's your advice then to parents? A lot of parents with children with special needs, or autism in particular, I think probably think that they are doing everything they can, and they are trying to communicate and let these children communicate for themselves. What would be your advice of how to maybe think laterally on that, or try to have some of the success that you've had?
Well, I think it's very important to note that this is a very polemic discussion right now on autism. We've had parents who 15 years ago had nothing, and they turned to a certain kind of therapy that was working with them because it catered to an autistic's learning style to a certain extent, which was rote learning, memory. But we've come to learn so much in that last 15 years, and we've also come to learn from autistics about stigma, stereotyping, and how they feel they want to be represented, which we have to listen to. So I'd say let's open up the table, bring everybody to it, don't restrict it, try not to make this so political and polemic, because the more we learn and understand about autism and the more we can work together, we're just going to do a whole lot of good in terms of educating and not stereotyping people.
Good advice. Thank you so much for talking with us, Estee. And for more information on Estee's Autism Acceptance Project, you can log on to our website, and the information's all there. That's at cbc.ca/Gill. We'll be right back.